This morning we're going to talk about God. Uh, in other films in this series, I've talked about the Holy Spirit, I've talked about Jesus, and I think it would only be appropriate if we gave God himself his day in court, as it were. The Course actually says very little about God, even though the word appears certainly on every page, if not every paragraph. In fact, probably the most important statement about God is made in the workbook, where Jesus says, you say the words God is, and then you cease to speak. Because actually, what can you say about God? Once you say God is something, or you begin to describe his attributes or traits, you're already diminishing him. Because if one had to define God, one would define God by saying he's perfect oneness, or he's perfect love, or he's totality or wholeness. But these are non-dualistic concepts. And once you say God is something else, where there's a subject and there's a predicate, you are then diminishing this non-dualistic oneness, this perfect oneness that is God's reality. So actually the only true thing that A Course in Miracles ever says is that God is. In other words, God is perfect being. All right? Everything else in the Course is offered to us as a correction for the ego's mistaken thoughts. And in the context of what we're talking about this morning, our mistaken thoughts about God. In fact, there's this wonderful prayer in Lesson 189 where Jesus tells us to be still and empty our minds of all thoughts we've ever had about anyone or anything, including God. Right? In fact, that prayer closes by saying, forget this world, forget this course, and come with wholly empty hands unto your God. That the way that we remember our Creator and Source, the way that we remember that we are the loving extension of him and of his one will, is by undoing all of our misconceptions. And certainly in terms of God, we have lots of them. When one looks at formal religion, and particularly in terms of the Western religions of Judaism and Christianity, what we could think of as the biblical religions, these are fraught with misconceptions about God. In fact, the whole concept of God, the person of God that one finds in the Bible, is nothing more but a projection of the unconscious thought system in the minds of the writers of the biblical books, and then of course all the people throughout the centuries who have read them and identified with them. There's a line in the text where Jesus says that we cannot even think of God without a body, or in some form we think we recognize. And so therefore, since we do identify as bodies, when we think of God, that's how we think of him, as a body, albeit a different kind of body from us, but nonetheless a body, a person. And the Course adopts the biblical language by speaking of God as a father, someone who knows about us, who loves us, who has a plan for us, etc. But all of these are metaphors that attempt to express in symbolic forms that we're comfortable with the reality of God. And so certainly when we speak about God the Father, this is a clear reference to the fact that we all have fathers. Right? Even if our fathers are dead or our fathers have abandoned us, there was still a father. Right? And so we understand the notion of parent and child. And so the Course uses that to try to express the relationship between creator and created. Even though in the end, in heaven, there is no creator or created. You can't have duality in a state of perfect oneness. So the idea of God as Father and Christ his Son, or creator and created, first cause, capital C, or effect, capital E, all of these are symbols that attempt to express a relationship that cannot be understood in any way in our dualistic universe. So that the way that we come to understand who and what God is by undoing all the impediments to that awareness. In other words, we're talking about the same Course process that we use and apply to every other issue. The way we learn what forgiveness is to recognize what forgiveness isn't. The way we recognize that there's a world beyond this world is to realize that there's nothing here that we value or that we want. So that, again, when we speak about God, we are speaking about a reality, our reality, of perfect love. A reality that has nothing whatsoever to do with the world. It's unchanging, it's unchangeable, it's eternal. But in the end, these would all be what the workbook in one place refers to as senseless musings. And whether we're senselessly musing about an ego thought system we can't really understand, or a world we cannot comprehend, or a God who's beyond our comprehension. It's all senselessly musing about something that we cannot understand. But what we can understand, which Jesus returns to repeatedly in the Course, is how to undo all these blocks, as he tells us in the introduction, to the awareness of love's presence. And when these blocks of specialness and guilt are undone, then what remains is this perfect love, and that perfect love is God.